Magus Elemental, a Jerry T favorite. Maybe that's what broke Jerry T and had him stop and move to Wizards. He needs a better Magus Elemental.
Sure.
Frostborn Weir, Young Pyromancer, 4 Master of the Waves. Those are 4 of creatures, and he's got 2 Porphyros. God of the Forge. Spells, we'll find a Bite of Thassa, 3 copies of Visit Charm, 2 copies of Rapid Hybridization, 3 Cyclonic Rift, 2 Dissolve, 2 Syncopate, 2 Missing Mortars, and 4 copies of Lightning Strike. So this is very much a Young Pyromancer deck.
Yes.
But it can make a lot of tokens to actually make Porphyros a pretty good card. And taking a look at his lands, he's got 4 Steam Vents, 2 Izzet Guild Gates, some islands, some mountains, and 3 copies of Mutavault, as Lundquist is going to start the show off with a Dried Militant, Fukushima with just a Steam Vents, and we'll see if Ben can get the beatdowns going before Fukushima can really just kind of get his deck set up.
Yeah, one of the nice things about Boros is you have a plethora of quality, low-cost creatures to choose from. As you Dry Militant and Soldier of the Pantheon, the individual quality of your creatures is so much higher than it is in a deck like Mono Red.
Young Pyromancer, the turn 2 play there for Fukushima, so he does have a blocker if he does want to block, but that can threaten a lot more blockers moving forward that can trade with actually all of these creatures, assuming that Ben doesn't have a Spear of Heliod, which I think he might have in his hand. I know he's got 1 in his deck.
Yeah, there's a singleton in the deck. Kibler was a big advocate for playing a second one, but myself, Benny, and Gary only wanted to play the 1, so you see the 1.
If you know if you're going to draw your 1, then there's no reason to play additional ones, which Lundquist has done here. So the legendary equipment that Heliod does use, that's in play. Of course, Artifact Enchantment. Going to trade the Young Pyromancer with the Soldier of the Pantheon. Fukushima going to take 6. And he's going to draw his card for the turn. Looks to be a Niv Magus Elemental was his draw. So now he needs to get some defenses online to stop this beatdown.
Yeah, and you're seeing a pretty ruthless, aggressive start from Lundquist here. You can imagine this draw easily, being awesome against a deck like Esper, for example.
Yes, this is the kind of draw that Esper does not want to be any part of. Three 1-drops by turn 2. As here is a little scry action, so the red-white land going to come into play for Ben. That means his Boros Charms are online now. He's got a Mutavault that's going to become a 3/3. We're going to get into the red zone with all the creatures. Young Pyromancer going to get in front of a Dried Militant. Fukushima going to take 6 more damage. We'll get those life totals updated for you guys at home as well. See exactly how low he is. I think he's down to 4 potentially at this point, maybe just 6. Let's see if Ben does have a follow-up play. He does. A Boros Elite in pass. He's got a lot of 1-drops.
Oh, yeah. And there's no end of quality white creatures to choose from.
A mountain drawn here for Fukushima. Again, we do see Niv Magus Elemental. There's a Biden of Thassa in his hand. He's got another Young Pyromancer. But what he needs is a Young Pyromancer plus a spell, like a Lightning Strike. A Young Pyromancer plus Lightning Strike turn would be huge for him.
Yeah, and a lot of Fukushima's cards actually line up pretty well against Lundquist, but Spear of Heliod throws that all for a loop.
Yeah.
The extra +1/+1 does a lot of work against, for example, Young Pyromancer tokens.
Lundquist going to fire up the Mutavault, going to attack with all 3 of his creatures, so his Boros Elite is going to have that Battalion trigger. It's going to be a 4/4 in combat. Time to do some blocking. Put the Young Pyromancer in front of the Militant. Niv Magus Elemental going to fall underneath the Boros Elite. Mutavault going to deal 3 points of damage, put Fukushima down. There's a Soldier of Pantheon. I'm just going to pass the turn back. So Lundquist sitting in great shape, mostly because of that Mutavault that's hanging back there.
Mutavault plus Boros Elite is... I was talking about it for, when I saw the Mutavault reprint, about Mutavault plus Battalion being basically the most powerful thing I could ever imagine. And I've been putting in a lot of work with Firefist Striker on Magic Online and Boros Elite, another excellent selection there.
So you do see Ben Lundquist will win game number 1 with his Boros deck over Hiroto Fukushima playing Izzet. As we'll move on to the sideboards here, we'll start with Fukushima's side first, as he will be on the play for this game. He's got 2 copies of Pith and Needle, 3 Skullcrack, 3 Anger of the Gods, a Rapid Hybridization, 3 Negates, and 3 Tidebinder Mages. The easy one here is Anger of the Gods.
Excellent.
I think that's excellent in this matchup. You can make arguments for Rapid Hybridization in this particular matchup. Interesting in that card in that I don't think you want to actually target Ben's cards outside of Mutavault. But what I do think you want to do is actually target your own creature, because there's a chance that a 3/3 will just stand tall over everything.
Yeah, no, Lundquist's deck, again, don't get too distortive of perspective from that first game. Only 1 copy of Spear of Heliod. He's basically just jamming with 2 power creatures. So your own 3/3 is a pretty potent defensive weapon. Also, you can set it up with Anger of the God, too, which is a nice little synergy.
I think it's pretty easy to decide. I think that, Fukushima has plenty of cards to sideboard out here. Counter Magic is, things that I don't think he wants in this matchup. He's got 2 Dissolve and 2 Syncopates in his main deck. I think those are easy to move out. He's got Biden of Thassa, which is just a little bit too slow to get online in this particular matchup as well. So I think plenty of things to sideboard out and kind of just strengthen his deck up a little bit here and to move into these sideboarded games.
Yeah, I think if I was in his seat, what I would want to do is sort of position myself as the control deck. Young Pyromancer has the potential to be excellent against Lundquist if it's backed up with sufficient removal, because 1/1s are awesome against Lundquist's army of 2/1s and 2/2s and that sort of thing. I would cut the counter spells and try to set myself up for kind of a longer game, and lean particularly on Young Pyromancer as a way to catch up on value.
Yeah, I mean, it's all about role assessment, right? Where one of these decks has to be aggro deck, one of these deck has to be the control deck, and I don't think that Lundquist actually can shift roles. I think he can only be the aggressor, so as a result, I think Fukushima has to become the control deck, and I think he does actually have the tools to do so.
Yep. On the other side, Lundquist has access to a Mizium Mortars, a Pacifism, 3 copies of Banisher Priest, 4 copies of Fiendslayer Paladin, and a War Leader Helix, all of which are reasonable. I would definitely want to have the Mortars and the Pacifism, because Frostborn Weird is a card that Lundquist has to really concern himself with.
Yeah.
The other stuff is a little more marginal. Fiendslayer Paladin potentially provides some utility against cards that Fukushima could potentially have, but between Anger of the Gods and Overloaded Mizium Mortars, Fukushima still can cover that card. But I would definitely anticipate the Pacifism and the Mizium Mortars coming in.
All right, well, both players are shuffling up there. Looks like they're ready for game number 2 here. Again, if you guys are just joining us, Cedric Phillips, Patrick Sullivan here in the booth at the StarCityGames.com Open Series in Los Angeles at Stan Lee's Kamikaze.
Yes.
Should be a lot of fun. I know that we're a little farther away from the convention, but we do each get a break over the course of the day, so I know I'll be checking out some things over there.
I'm a huge Silver Age comic junkie. I own a lot of Stan Lee's actual comics that he himself wrote.
Okay.
So I love going to this show. Just kind of wander around the hall for a little while.
So you would say that your nerd cred is high?
In this case, yes.
Okay. All right. My dad, my father, excuse me, my father is a collector of comic books. He has over 20,000 of them. So
yes. The lights have just dimmed.
Yeah,
Gone down a little bit.
This is kind of what happens at the Kamikaze. This is what happens. Lights go on and off, and this is the miracle of live television. And now we're back. See, and now we're just here.
Yeah.
Back
I feel like we need one of the flashlights, and we can start.
I think my phone can do that. I think if I do this really quickly, we can get some brightness here. But we are back in the booth. Cedric Phillips, Patrick Sullivan, as we do get these lights worked out, they'll be back on. This could happen in live television.
Yeah.
This is a thing that can occur. So we'll make do. So we saw Lundquist win game 1 pretty easily there.
Yep.
How do we feel about this matchup in general for him? I mean, he's going to be the aggressor. He's going to try to give the beatdowns. I think that, again, Fukushima does have tools to actually turn things in his favor. Young Pyromancer has got pinpoint removal, Frostborn Weird, Master of Waves if that gets online. It seems like the first game it feels like how Ben wants to go. I'm not sure if that's an accurate representation of how things actually go, though.
Yeah, I think there are certainly draws that Benny can have that just blow the Izzet deck out of the water. They're just too fast. I do think that the Izzet deck has a reasonable game with Young Pyromancer just because of the size of Benny's creatures.
Okay.
But he needs to kind of take a defensive posturing in the matchup, and particularly in game 1, he has a mixture of kind of these aggressive elements and these control elements. His deck needs to be much more focused into just being a control deck in the matchup. I don't know if he has enough cards in his sideboard to make that sort of conversion.
Sure.
But his best control draws, I think, have a very good shot of being Boros.
Okay. And again, it's interesting because, as you know, this deck is kind of a little all over the place. Is it deck here? But once he actually does sync it up in the way that he wants it, I feel like things actually kind of side to his favor. He's got plenty of removal.
Yes.
His creatures are actually difficult for the Boros deck to answer because the Boros deck doesn't have, as we do have lights here. Look at that. You can definitely clap it up. That means they're going to definitely go off again in a minute. But it seems like the Boros deck is going to have trouble just getting through these cards. I mean, Ben does have access to Mizium Mortars, but outside of that, it seems pretty tough for him.
And the threat of an overloaded Mortars is this aspect that hovers over the entire game from Lundquist's perspective. He has to win pretty quickly. He has to be, at some points, conservative with his Brave the Elements and allow certain creatures to die or trade in combat because an overloaded Mortars will often be lights out.
Well, we see some shuffling here, so we will be underway for game number 2 again. A lights out reference made by Patrick. Really good there. I saw what you did.
Dude, it's just
really, that's why we bring you back.
It comes so naturally to me. You wouldn't even believe it.
I know, I do believe it. This isn't my first shindig with you. It was well done.
Thanks.
It was really, really well done.
Like I said, it's just, you know.
It's El Natural.
It's just, it's like giving credit for breathing or for walking. It's just, I don't know how I do it. It's just the thing.
Yeah, it's like giving credit to Luis Scott Vargas for his puns.
Right.
It's just an everyday thing.
Yeah, I don't even know what that even means. You
Yeah.
know what I mean?
Yeah.
How could I take credit for such an act?
You know what I don't really like here? I'm going to tell you. I'm going to be straight honest with you. Ben with yellow sleeves on a white weenie deck. Not okay. Not okay. As a white weenie enthusiast, he's going to start off with a Sacred Foundry. The yellow sleeves, they just don't make a ton of sense. Soldier Pantheon, you're going to start the show. Lundquist down to 18.
An Anger of the Gods, a draw for Fukushima.
That's bad news, Bears. Now, of course, Lundquist's deck, it does have Brave the Elements 4, which is a reason to play a white strategy in this format, especially a white weenie deck. But Anger of the Gods, if Ben doesn't have one, as here is a Dried Militant, there's a Plains, and now he's going to get cleaned up here. Assuming that Fukushima does have that red mana, which there it is, and there's the Anger of the Gods. Now, and if you saw Lundquist's hand, he does have a Brave the Elements in his hand too, so he could have slowed down a little bit.
Well, given all the creatures that Fukushima played in the first game, I think it's very hard to put him on Anger of the Gods.
I agree.
If I was in Lundquist's seat, I would have gotten blown out the exact same way this game.
Sure.
It's just a hard read to make.
Yeah. So you see a Fiend Slayer Paladin's going to come down for Ben, but don't ignore that third land, because that third land wasn't mutable, so the offense is still going to be back on. You see Ben is kind of wondering, should that Anger of the Gods be in the graveyard? Because I had Dried Militants in the player, should it be exiled? Just want to make sure that the game state is clear. Speaking with the judge at the table, looks like we're all good to go. As Young Pyromancer is the draw step here for Fukushima.
And that draw was awesome for Fukushima because it looked like his hand was basically just all reactive elements.
Mm-hmm.
Now he has something to start churning out tokens.
And he's going to pass the turn back here. Does not play Young Pyromancer, maybe trying to catch a Mutavault. But again, you have to know exactly what you're playing against here for Fukushima. You're playing against a deck that does have Brave the Elements. So how likely is it for your removal spell to actually clean out a Mutavault? As Ben plays another Mutavault and activates his first one and gets into the red zone.
Well, he can certainly is a charm the Mutavault. That's a
sure.
That one's pretty much a guaranteed success.
Okay. Well, is it Charm Mutavault is what's going to happen. So that's going to bite the dust. Obviously, can't Brave the Elements. That only protects white creatures. First strike damage there from the Fiend Slayer. Ben's going to gain a little bit of life, deal a little bit of damage, and Fukushima is going to untap and take his turn. And this is exactly, obviously, where he wants to be.
Yes.
In this matchup. He has to play the control role, as we did mention during the sideboarding, and he's done a fantastic job of it so far. I think we're going to see Ben play a different game in Game 3, where he might be a little bit slower to the board so that Brave the Elements actually does have an effect.
Yeah, no, certainly he has information he didn't have access to after the first game.
Steam Vent's going to come into play on tap, knock Fukushima down to 14. There is a Young Pyromancer. And he's just going to pass the turn back with access to Cyclonic Rift up. Does have Missing Mortars and another copy of Anger of the Gods in his hand. In comes the Fiend Slayer Paladin. Looks like we might see a bounce. All right, we are going to see a bounce. And then a trigger. So an Elemental token coming in. It's Ben want to cast to Brave the Elements on this. As you guys do see Cyclonic Rift on the screen.
With Fukushima still at 14, I don't think that's the fight you want to fight.
Yeah.
And it sort of, hedges against potential additional sweepers from Fukushima for Lundquist to let the bounce spell happen, then just recast his creature. And he takes some of the sting out of Anger of the Gods potentially.
There's a Scry with the red-white Temple. Lundquist resolves the Scry, plays the Fiend Slayer Paladin again, still just has Brave the Elements in his hand. Don't forget about the Mutavault among his lands. So that's pretty much all he's got going on. So Fukushima's working with some pretty good information right now.
Yes. And a lot of power in his hand. Looks like he has a Mortars, a Lightning Strike. Remember, overloaded Mortars does not target, so
correct.
It can catch a Fiend Slayer Paladin.
Well, into the red zone comes the Fiend Slayer. Does have first strike, so a pretty safe attack. Fukushima says, I'll take the damage. Can't beat it in combat. We'll see if Lundquist has a follow-up play. You see he's going to go reaching 2 mana. It's going to be a Precinct Captain. Going to pass the turn back. Lightning Strike, perhaps? It is. And Lundquist, I think, now has I mean, we're working with great information, but I think he's given away that he has to Brave the Elements.
Yep.
And, is it worth saving my Precinct Captain? I don't think the Brave Elements is going to get much better.
Yeah, he has not much of a board beyond it, so it's not like that. Brave the Elements is really protecting him from some large sweeper if he allows the Precinct Captain to die. And his first strike creature is especially valuable in trying to slog through this Young Pyromancer.
Yeah.
I think if it was a normal creature, that would be one thing, but he really has to value his first striking creatures highly here.
You see Fukushima in his hand has a Mizian Mortars and an Anger of the Gods. Just drew an Is it Guildgate for the turn. So he's up to 5 mana. You see he's considering, do I want to cast Anger of the Gods and clear everything away? But that'll clear away all of his creatures too. So I'm not entirely sure if it's worth it or if he should just try to draw the 6th land to get to the Mortars.
He also might be thinking about racing here.
Yep.
And it looks like that's what he's going to do.
So he says, all right, I'm going to take down your Priest Cath, I'm going to get a token, and is he going to get into the red zone here?
I'm not a huge fan of this line from Fukushima. I would have tried to just set up a large mortars here.
Yeah, that's kind of the way that I feel too, is that you're 1 land away, and so now you're in the situation where if I draw lands, it's fine, and if I draw spells, it's fine, which is a situation you want to be in the current game state. So I think that pulling the trigger on that mortars may have been a little bit hasty.
And it's definitely going to send Lundquist into the tank here too, because, you know, why on earth would he have fired off that mortars with 5 lands in play? What's the last card in his hand? And if I was in Lundquist's seat, I would probably the first thing I would go to is probably another copy of Mizzing Mortars would be my guess.
You see Ben is going to fire up Mutavault and attack with it. He's going to trade that for 2 tokens. Aggressive line there from Lundquist. A little surprised to see that play.
Well, you know, his Mutavault's not getting that much better here, right?
Sure.
And Fukushima's down to 1 card in his hand, so it's possible, you know, his Young Pyromancer doesn't even have a lot of left in the tank.
Lundquist's going to attack here with the Fiendslayer Paladin. Fukushima says, I'm going to take it. I'll go down to 10. You can go up to 24. I think Ben's draw step for the turn was another Fiendslayer Paladin, I believe. But I'm kind of with you. Does he want to play it? Because if he's on the same read as you, then it's okay. I think you have another Mortars in your hand. You're just waiting to draw the 6th land. But he is going to play the other Fiendslayer Paladin. So 2 of those. We'll see what he's trying to dodge. Niv Magus Elemental drawn here for Fukushima.
Yeah, this is a curious spot for.
It's a snap block. I mean, this is obviously going to be Anger of the Gods, and Ben knows that. So both of his guys are going to die, and then there's Niv Magus Elemental, to follow up with. So I think we can say that Fukushima has sufficiently stabilized this game.
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, Lundquist has a pretty high life total, and you know, Fukushima is definitely also at risk of just flooding out in this sort of game because he just doesn't apply a lot of pressure. His deck's mostly reactive. So he's not out of the woods yet, but definitely this is a much better pacing of the game than what happened in the first one.
Young Pyromancer off the top there for Fukushima. Going to play that and pass the turn back again. We know that he has his last card, a Lightning Strike. Looks like Lundquist is starting to draw some lands. There is a Daring Skyjack, your favorite card.
Yep.
That's going to die to a Lightning Strike. Token going to come into play. So now Fukushima is starting to turn the corner here, and Ben's outs are going to start to get cut pretty rapidly here.
Yep. And Young Pyromancer, like I said during the sideboarding games, definitely, in my mind, Fukushima's most powerful tool in this matchup.
Yeah. Lundquist draws his 3rd Mutavault of the game, just going to pass the turn back, so that can certainly block, and I think Ben would be willing to trade with the Young Pyromancer as fast as he can if it does come into the red zone. Fukushima plays an Is it Guildgate. He is holding on to a Cyclonic Rift right now, and we'll see if he's going to come into the red zone with everything or not here, or anything at all, honestly.
Yep. Cyclonic Rift weirdly dead here as it cannot target Mutavault.
Yep.
So, and nor can it target any of Fukushima's own cards.
Yeah.
So it's just actually a card that is literally uncastable.
Hey,
now.
something that the old Niv Magus Elemental could eat for dinner soon.
Yeah.
It just needs something to target. Here's a Plains from Ben, and there is a Banisher Priest. That is a target.
Yeah, we talked about this card a little bit during the sideboarding games as well.
Going to try to take down a Young Pyromancer. Will get the job done. Banisher Priest, the card that Patrick Chapin talked a lot about after his 9th place finish at Pro Tour Theros with the black-white mid-range deck. A deck that really hasn't caught on very much due to Mono Black Devotion's performance. Some just saying that deck is better than black-white mid-range. But Patrick's saying that, you know, if I could do it all over again, I certainly would have played some copies of Banisher Priest in my deck as it combats a lot of the decks that were at Pro Tour Theros.
Yeah, and I saw a lot of this card, you know, kind of during week 1 of Standard on Magic Online. When White Weenie was a much bigger deal.
Yeah.
And certainly in the mirror match or any sort of creature-oriented matchup, Banisher Priest was one of the more powerful incentives to build the deck this way.
So a little bit of draw-go action here between the two players. Again, if you're Lundquist, you have to tread pretty lightly here because Nevaga's Elemental can grow to a 3/4 at any time, and that's pretty much going to beat you in combat. Now, you also know that Fukushima has these powerful cards that can be overloaded, Mizian Mortars and Cyclonic Rift, and he has enough mana to do so for both of those spells. So it's a pretty hairy situation here if you're Ben.
Yeah, especially, we in the booth and you at home have the luxury of kind of getting to see each player's hands. Lundquist doesn't have that benefit, and there's sort of been so many weird cards and kind of a weird overall pacing and texture to the game that it's hard for Lundquist to put a great read on exactly what's going on the other side of the table.
Now, something incredibly interesting happened there, Patrick, which is Fukushima drew a Niv-Magus Elemental for the turn. His hand was Cyclonic Rift and Steam Vents. He played his Steam Vents untapped, went down to 8, so that he could keep up Cyclonic Rift to be able to overload it. But by going down to 8, that opens him up to one of the reasons that Ben is even splashing this deck, Boros Charm. So if he runs off 2 of those, all of a sudden, Fukushima, when he was sitting at 10, he'd be sitting at dead if Ben's able to run a runner.
Yeah, going down to a multiple of 4 against Boros is a very risky play, as we see the Mutavault trade with the Niv-Magus Elemental.
Yeah, the token's still left over. Of course, Mutavault being a 2/2, Niv-Magus being a 1/2, token being a 1/1. Ben says, I'll take care of your 1/2 because that thing can grow to a 3/4 or who knows what and pass the turn back. So I do kind of agree with you. I like how Ben's playing his Mutavaults here because he's not overvaluing them.
Yep. And you can see he's willing to do this song and dance where, he's willing to commit to the board as much as Fukushima is requiring him to do so.
And it's interesting, too, because Fukushima doesn't have really a card that he can ultimately punish Ben with. Like, he doesn't have a card like Storm Breath Dragon hanging out in his deck that says, oh, if I draw this, the game is going to be over in 2 or 3 turns. Everything that he does is very incremental and kind of slow as far as getting a game over with, as here comes Precinct Captain into the red zone.
So we'll see if this draws out either a removal spell or something for Niv-Magus Elementally or something.
Yeah. I feel like Fukushima's going to make some sort of movement here.
Yeah.
And she tapping a single blue, that kind of signals rapid hybridization. And that's what the card in his hand is, and that's what he's reaching towards. I think he's trying to figure out what to target. He says, how about a Banisher Priest?
Yeah, he could, target his own elemental token. He could eat it with the elemental. He could target Banisher Priest. There's a lot of ways for him to play this card.
So he says, I want to take down your Banisher Priest, give you a 3/3. Is that okay? And he says, actually, I'm going to eat that, and I'm going to make my 3/4 get in front of your 2/2.
I actually really like the idea of him using a Rapid Hybridization of the Banisher Priest there, as it sets up a really good Cyclonic Rift.
Sure.
You remove the token, your Young Pyromancer triggers. There's a lot of little pieces there that are nice.
And it seems like there's a little bit of confusion on exactly how this Rapid Hybridization is going to resolve. He says, I'm targeting your Banisher Priest. Did he hold priority to eat it? What exactly was the case here? I think that's what the judge and the spotter are trying to figure out here. So as soon as we know, we'll be able to tell you guys at home. Because it looks like both players are just a little, some slight confusion. But overall, I think I'm with you in that I think I would actually want the Rapid Hybridization to resolve. Give Ben the 3/3, get my Young Pyromancer back, and then before blocks, say pick them all up, get myself a 1/1 Elemental token, and then take care of the 3/3 that way with the Rift. But what's going to end up happening here is what we may thought was going to actually happen in the first place now.
So yeah, it appears that Fukushima tried to eat, but there was a pause, and Lundquist passed priority, so that Rapid Hybridization just has to resolve.
Yep.
If you want to use the Elemental that way, you basically have to say, cast my spell, and I'm going to eat it all the same.
Yeah, I'm going to hold priority, as it were.
Right.
Niv-Magus Elemental is kind of a complicated card in that fashion. I remember the first time I actually read Niv-Magus Elemental, I just didn't understand how it worked at all.
It is, I also did not understand it.
So now you're going to get a Cyclonic Rift here.
All right, so that is eating.
Yeah, so he's gonna eat this. You see him reaching for the die, so he wants to put the 2 counters on his Niv-Magus Elemental. And then he should get an Elemental token from that, which I believe he's already got. Okay, so he's got his Elemental token now. And now Ben just says, all right, I'm going to cast Brave the Elements, named Red, so I can get through.
Who's going to cause... Fukushima's going to fall 6 here. Lundquist is going to get a token off of his Precinct Captain.
So Ben is slowly but surely kind of making up some ground here. And again, he's still in the situation where, again, running Boros Charms are going to get the job done.
Yeah. It's possible Boros Charm isn't in his deck anymore.
I would be surprised. Would you?
There's an argument for it.
Okay. Such a powerful card, it would just be hard for me to want to sideboard out.
It's often rough in matchups that are at all about playing to the board.
Okay.
Because, the indestructible mode is marginal, the double strike mode doesn't come out, and 4 damage to the face in that kind of game is not necessarily where you want to be. So,
Fukushima draws Rapid Hybridization for the turn. Lundquist is going to play.
You're under arrest.
Yeah, I did not think that this was a thing I was going to say today. Azorius Arrestor, which is going to, wow, all these words are coming out of my mouth. Detain the Niv Magus Elemental and get into the red zone. But that top deck Rapid Hybridization is going to target a token. It's going to give Young Pyromancer another token. So the Elemental is basically going to replace itself. He's going to get a 3/3 Frog Lizard now.
So we'll see how all this is getting ordered up here momentarily.
I'm sorry, this is all you.
You're under arrest.
You're guilty of this.
You're under arrest. I like this card better than Opposing Sovereign. And that's kind of the slot that it's taking.
Okay, I guess I could see that. I can see that, sure. You have a little more flexibility, I guess, with this card instead of Imposing Sovereign.
Well, when you draw it, it's productive instead of Opposing Sovereign, which is kind of only good on turn 2, like on the play, kind of.
Okay.
Like in these kind of boards, the Arrestor is way better than Imposing Sovereign.
Definitely better.
Yeah.
Definitely better. All right, so the dust settles. Some damage takes place. Some trades happen. Ben's going to take a look at Fukushima's graveyard. Excuse me. Fukushima looks like he's drawn an Izzet Charm for the turn to go along with the island in his hand. So he could take care of the Arrestor.
Yes.
If he'd like to. It's not really a tough guy, that Arrestor.
Or loot and generate a token off your Young Pyromancer with your extra land. And
also fine.
Like many Izzet decks, historically, they have a lot of funky options afforded to them over there.
So it's going to be a draw 2, discard 2, it looks like. So hit 1, island. Hit 2. Believe that was a Master of Waves, I believe. You see him sliding his creatures over.
Very powerful draw here.
And it is going to be a Master. Devotion going to be 2. One from Niv Magus, one from Master itself. So he's going to get 2 Elemental tokens. For me, this is, if I had won the Invitational, this is the token I want to be, by the way.
A Master of Waves token?
Yeah, I would like to be the 1/0 Elemental.
Okay.
Mostly because I want to see what Kristen could draw with that.
I want to be the Red Soldier.
Is that from Red Soldier? From
Theros.
That's a Crowan, the Crusader?
Yep.
All right, I can get behind that. You're not going to see a lot of play.
That's fine.
Okay, I just want to make sure you come to terms with that.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
So if you're not familiar with Master Waves by now, and I would be surprised if you aren't, there it is on the screen for you guys. Lundquist going to draw his card for the turn. It is an Ajani.
Whoa.
Is that? Does he have a flyer in play?
No, he does not. He's got a Frog Lizard and a Arrestor.
And he's cardless, so if we jump the old... yeah, I think we're going to jump this, and that should be lethal. And that's 6, and that is it. So Benjamin Lundquist does defeat Hiroto Fukushima 2-0. Boros getting the job done over Izzet.
Yeah, I want to say I wish we had, really let it settle in how much complete and total nonsense was on that board.
Yeah,
also, Also, for the record, it was an Ajani Caller Pride jumped, Rapid Hybridization token, leaping over a Young Pyromancer, Master of Waves, several tokens.
2 different types of elemental tokens.
And a Niv Magus elemental that was detained by Azorius Arrestor.
Yes.
Total nonsense.
That's correct.
That was total nonsense.
And that's why our standard format is fantastic. Cedric Phillips, Patrick Sullivan back here in the booth. StarCityGames.com Open Series here in Los Angeles. Lundquist getting it done. 2-0 with Boros. Deck I know, at least a guild near and dear to your heart. I know you.
Yes.
I know you own a Boros shirt.
2 of them actually.
That's embarrassing.
Well,
what's the need for the second one?
Well, I brought it actually with me to the Grand Prix in Charlotte.
Okay.
Didn't wear it day 1.
Okay.
Got a completely busted Boros pool.
I do recall.
And I was like, all right, sure, I'll go spring for the shirt.
So just face up?
Yeah.
I'm Boros all the way?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So we take a look at this Boros deck. This is a deck that Ross Merriam got 9th place with, in Star City Games Open Series in Worcester. Basically our first standard tournament of that. He lost playing for top 8 to a green-red deck. There's been kind of like some talk about this deck as being like a pretty good strategy. There's a time and a place